You've done what most people won't. Steady income, real savings, health insurance, monthly retirement contributions, by every visible standard you've handled it. And yet, somewhere underneath that, there's a thought you can't quite shake loose. What would actually happen if I lost my job? Not would I be uncomfortable, not would I need to adjust, but would the whole structure actually hold? That thought isn't irrational, it isn't anxiety without cause. It's your financial instincts picking up on something your plan hasn't confronted yet. Because what happens to responsible, prepared households after a real job loss reveals something most financial planning content refuses to say out loud. A significant number of them don't hold. Not because they were reckless, not because they failed to save, but because they built their financial security on three structural assumptions that were never tested, especially not all at once. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what those three assumptions are, why they exist inside even the most carefully built financial plans, and what a genuinely resilient structure looks like when you rebuild around them. The most important piece, the part that changes what you do next, I've saved for the last third. Stay with me. Let me describe the person I'm talking about. You're not living beyond your means. You're not carrying credit card debt you can't manage. You have an emergency fund, maybe 3 months of expenses, maybe 6. You contribute to a 401k consistently. You carry employer-sponsored health insurance. Maybe you own a home with real equity in it. You pass every standard financial checklist. And still the question lingers. Because you've already noticed, even if you haven't been able to name it, that your financial plan works perfectly as long as everything else keeps working. That's not a small distinction. That's the entire difference between a plan that functions in normal conditions and a plan that holds when conditions stop being normal. Most plans have only ever been tested under the first kind. The first structural gap is the most misunderstood, and it's inside almost every emergency fund built by a responsible household. Most people believe their emergency savings are designed to cover a job loss. In theory, that's exactly what they're for. In practice, a job loss doesn't just remove income. It removes several things simultaneously, and most emergency funds are only calibrated for one of them. Here's what actually happens in the same week you lose your job, your paycheck stops. Your employer-subsidized health insurance ends, and replacing it under COBRA can cost 2 to 3 times what you were paying before. Your employer's retirement contribution disappears, often between 3% and 6% of your annual salary. Any life or disability coverage your employer was partially funding, gone too. The emergency fund was sized against monthly expenses, assuming those benefit costs remain at their subsidized rate. They don't. The real financial disruption of a job loss is typically 30 to 50% larger than the savings math accounts for. That's not a flaw in how much you saved. It's a flaw in the framing. Employment was treated as a fixed constant in the plan when it should have been treated as the variable it actually is. And that gap stays invisible until the exact moment it's no longer fixable. The second gap is quieter, but in some ways more dangerous, because it hides behind numbers that look genuinely strong on paper. Financial security in an actual emergency isn't a function of wealth. It's a function of liquid, accessible capital. Here's what that means. Many responsible households have their financial assets distributed across multiple categories. A 401k, a brokerage account, home equity, maybe a CD. The total looks strong. The wealth is real. But in a job loss scenario, you don't have weeks to make strategic decisions. You need cash in days. Home equity requires a transaction. A 401k withdrawal before age 59.5 triggers taxes and a 10% penalty, potentially costing 30 to 40 cents on every dollar at the moment you can least afford to lose them. And if you're drawing from a taxable brokerage account during an economic downturn, which is precisely when job losses tend to cluster, selling into a declining market means locking in losses permanently. Most financial plans track total savings and net worth. What they don't track is this specific question. If I needed $25,000 in the next 2 weeks, what would it actually cost me to access it, and what would be left afterward? That question is what a real stress test asks. Most plans have never had to answer it. Now here's where this becomes more serious than it first appears, and this is the shift most people miss. These two gaps don't operate in isolation. They're not separate problems you can address one at a time on a quiet weekend. In a real disruption, they activate simultaneously. Think of your financial plan as a bridge, well-engineered, quality materials. It passes every standard inspection because it was calibrated for steady, predictable load evenly distributed over time. A job loss isn't a single weight added to one end. It's 3 simultaneous pressure points arriving at once. Income stops, unsubsidized costs spike, and your liquid capital starts carrying structural weight it was never designed to carry alone. This is why responsible, prepared households still end up in serious financial difficulty after a job loss. Not because the bridge was built wrong, because it was never stress tested for what it looks like when three things go wrong at once. The third gap is the one almost no one talks about, because it doesn't feel like a problem while it's forming. When you set up your insurance coverage, it was calibrated to your life at that moment. Your income at the time, your dependents, your mortgage, your assets, the coverage made sense. You did exactly the right thing. The problem is that coverage doesn't update itself. Nothing in your financial system sends an alert when your life changes, and your protection quietly stops matching your actual exposure. In the years since you set those policies, maybe your income grew significantly. Maybe you added dependents, expanded a home, or accumulated more assets. The financial risk your household carries today, the replacement income a surviving spouse would need, the mortgage that would need servicing, is almost certainly larger than it was when you bought that policy. But the policy stayed where you left it. This is what financial professionals call coverage drift. It's one of the most widespread vulnerabilities in households that have otherwise done everything right. The protection is real. The coverage is real. It just quietly stopped matching what you actually need, and it will keep not matching invisibly right up until the moment it matters most. Here's what I saved for this point, and this is the part that changes what you actually do next. The three gaps I've described aren't individual problems requiring individual fixes. They're symptoms of a single structural issue. Financial plans are built once, calibrated to the moment they're built, and then maintained as though the conditions they were designed for are permanent. Real financial security isn't a plan you build, it's a plan you test. The question isn't, do I have savings? You do. The question is, has this plan ever been run under simultaneous pressure? This is what I call a simultaneity stress test, and it's the one exercise that almost never appears in mainstream financial planning advice. Here's exactly how to run it. Take your current plan and remove three things at once. Assume income stops tomorrow, assume health insurance becomes your full unsubsidized cost, and assume your only accessible capital is your liquid tier, no retirement penalties, no equity transactions, no selling into a down market. Just the cash and cash equivalent accounts you can reach in days. Under those three conditions simultaneously, how long does your plan hold? What does it cost you? What's still standing at day 90? The gap between what you assumed and what the numbers actually show, that's the specific number worth protecting against. And for most households that run this exercise for the first time, the gap is larger than expected. Not because they failed, because this question was never asked. Here's what matters most. Every gap I described is fully addressable. Not with dramatic overhauls, with targeted adjustments to what you've already built. For the employment gap, resize your emergency fund to include the true cost of job loss, full unsubsidized health coverage for your household, plus your employer's retirement contribution for a minimum of 3 months. Run those actual numbers once. The difference from what you calculated before is the number to fill. For the access gap, map your assets by liquidity tier. Tier 1 is cash and cash equivalents accessible in days, no penalty. Everything else is Tier 2 or 3. Your entire 90-day emergency window should be covered by Tier 1 alone. If it isn't, that specific shortfall is what to address next. For coverage drift, one annual review, one question: does this coverage reflect my life today or my life when I originally set it up? If the answer is when I set it up, a single conversation with your insurance professional resolves it in under an hour. None of this is complicated. It's specific. And in financial planning, specificity is exactly what separates a plan that works in good conditions from a structure that holds when conditions become hard. The quiet unease you've carried, even after doing the work, even after building something real, is not irrational. It's the difference between a bridge that's been inspected under standard conditions and one that's been stress-tested under the load it might actually face. You've already done the hard part. You built something genuine. The only thing left is to ask it the one question it hasn't been asked yet. What happens when all three pressure points arrive at once? Answer that with your actual numbers, not theoretical ones, and the uncertainty has nowhere left to stand. If you want to go deeper on sizing that emergency fund for a real job loss scenario, not the textbook formula, but the actual calculation, that's exactly what the next video covers.